Hello everyone, I am Deepika from LearnoHub, a free learning platform where you can study physics, chemistry, maths, biology absolutely for free only at learnohub.com. So students, we are here with our next chapter of class 10 biology, that is chemical coordination in plants. So starting with the plant movement. So talking about animals first, you must have seen animals moving from one place to another. So they do show movements, but they also locomote. They change their places. But that is not true in case of plants, because plants cannot change their position. They remain at a place, but they show slight movements that we can observe very clearly. Like we can see a plant bend. Okay, so if there is a plant, we can see this plant bend, right? So we have done certain experiments in photosynthesis chapter also, where we have seen a plant which was kept inside and there was a window from where the sunlight was coming. So we have seen our plant bending towards the light. So that is one kind of movement that we have seen in plants. The second kind of the movement that we see in plants is twisting. You must have seen a plant getting twisted. So there are certain plants which are not very strong by their stem, so they cannot stand upright. So in that case, they always look for a support. If they get a support, they are able to grow nicely. Okay, so if there is a plant which does not have a very strong stem that can stand upright, so they have tendrils which look for a support, and finally they twist around this support, right? So this is twisting. So you must have seen elongation also, as I was saying, in case of a plant that has bent towards the light. Okay, so half of the plant, the half of the stem has elongated, right? So that elongation towards the sunlight, so that is another kind of a movement. So I hope the plant movement, the basics of the plant movements are clear. So the movement in case of plants are dependent on internal and external factors. So the changes in the external and internal environment of an organism is called as stimuli. The thing that stimulates a plant to behave like that, to twist, to bend, to change its to curl around a support, right? So these are the changes which are present either inside the plant or in the external environment, and the actions or the movements which are caused by the stimuli, they are called as responses. So whatever actions or movements that a plant shows as a result of this stimuli, so they are called as responses. The way the plant responds to these factors, these internal and external factors. Now, why animal movement is different from that of plant movements? So, many of you must be thinking that plants do not move at all, right? So, there are no movement in plants, correct? But now, when we will study this chapter, when we have started studying this chapter, you have realized that yes, plants do move, correct? Now, if we see the mode of nutrition in case of plants and animals, so in case of plants, they are autotrophs, right? So they synthesize their own food by the process of photosynthesis. So they synthesize their food by the process of photosynthesis. And in case of animals, these animals are dependent on the plants for their food. Correct? Directly or indirectly, they are dependent on them. Okay, so these different modes of nutrition are the reason for the movement. So since plants, they are autotrophs, they just have to capture the sunlight, they have to absorb water, they have to absorb carbon dioxide, and they prepare their own food. But that is not true in case of animals. They have to move around for their food. So as I said, they are directly or indirectly dependent on plants. So herbivores will directly eat plant. Herbivores will directly eat a plant, but not necessarily the plant which is which is in front of them. Okay, so they have different feeding habits, and there are some plants which are there are some animals which are carnivores. So those animals, they have to move around in search of food. So this is the reason why there is difference in movements in case of plants and animals. The next thing, plants do not need any bodily movements. So we can see the plants, they do not need to move a lot. Okay, so they stand at a place, they photosynthesize, they take their nutrition, right? But in case of animals, they do need these bodily movements because they do need to hide themselves, they do need to run around in search of food. So these are the reasons why there are different movements in case of plants and animals. In many cases, you must be thinking that there are no movements at all. There is no nervous system in case of plants, but there is a nervous system. That is why we can see those little changes that can be observed in case of plants, like twisting, like bending, like elongation. So there is a nervous system in case of plants, right? So but it is not a well developed nervous system, but there is a chemical control, right? So there are chemicals which control the movements in case of plants. They do not have neurons like we humans do have, but still they have chemicals which regulate their movements, correct? Now talking about hormones, so you must have studied hormones in case of animals. We see there are different kinds of hormones that regulate our body, right? So the same kind of hormones, they are not exactly the same kind of hormones, but there are hormones that are present in case of plants as well. So plants respond to stimuli by producing chemicals that work as messengers. So we call them as hormones in case of plants as well. So we also call them as phytohormones, or we can call them as plant hormones. So these are the hormones, these are the chemicals which are present in plants which work as messenger. Now these as we have studied in case of animals, that these are produced at one site, at one location, and then they are transported to the another areas where they actually respond, right? Where they create a stimulus, and hence there is a response that we can see in case of plants. So now they show effect at different locations which are far away from the site of their production. Now in case of especially in case of plants, the movement is shown in form of growth. So either a plant will grow or the growth will be inhibited. So that is the kind of movement that we can see, that is the kind of response to the hormones that can be seen in case of plants. So plants, they respond to hormones by growth. So it can be stimulated, it can be inhibited. So just recall that photosynthesis experiments where we were talking about the essentiality of the sunlight. So when we kept a plant inside a room and there was a sunlight that was coming from this window, so plant actually bent towards the sun, right? So why? Because there were certain hormones which shifted to the darker side, to this side, right? To this side. And now when these hormones shifted towards the darker side, the elongation of the stem elongated from the opposite side of that area, right? So they showed that there are certain hormones that regulate the growth in case of plants, as we have seen the hormones in case of animals. Now talking about the areas where we can see the growth in case of plants. So there are the main areas of growth in plants and we call them as meristems. So basically meristems are the root tip or the shoot tip. So tips of the roots or tips of the shoots where we can see the plant growing. Okay, so if just say this is a plant, right? So there will be shoot tips. So these will be the shoots, and these will be the tips of the shoots. So we can see the growth over here. So we can see the cell division, the plant growing from here. We will not see the growth at this particular point. So same is the case in case of roots. So in case of root, so there will be tips where these meristems will be present. These are the places where the root will grow, right? So root will not grow from here, it will grow from here. So these are the main areas in plants where we can see growth. Now the meristems, they are sensitive to hormones. So this is true. Hormones, they help to stretch the cellulose wall of the meristematic cell, which facilitate division. So there are certain cellulose walls. So we know that plants have a lot of cellulose. So these cellulose have, so there is a cellulose wall of the meristematic cell, right? So these hormones help to stretch this cellulose wall so that they can facilitate division. They can actually help the plant to divide. Correct? So I hope the area where the plant actually grows is clear. So they do not grow from anywhere, but they actually grow at the tips of roots and shoots, and we call those points as meristems, where the cells are actively dividing. The cells are in the dividing phase and they grow rapidly if they get good conditions, if they get hormones, if they get everything that is required for the growth. So along with these hormones, plants are also sensitive to light. How much light that a plant is getting throughout the day, from where this light is coming, and also not only light, but there are certain another factors like gravity, like soil, like temperature. So these are the certain conditions which affect the growth of the plant, right? Now there was a term called phytohormones, the hormones which are related to plants. So we call them as phytohormones, right? So this term was coined by William Bellis and Ernst Sterling in 1902. So this is something important for you to remember for your exams. Now talking about our first phytohormone, that is auxins. So auxin was the term which was coined by F.W. Went in 1928. So this was a word that came from a Greek word, that is auxine. So auxine means to grow, right? So auxine is a Greek word which means to grow, and this term was coined by whom? F.W. Went. Right? So this was the first growth hormone that was being discovered. So there are total 5 hormones that we study in case of plants, but the first growth hormone that was discovered was auxin. Clear? So this is a hormone which is universally distributed. So you can find this hormone in higher plants, in lower plants, in all the plants, right? So majorly it is present in higher plants at the growing tips, at root apex or the shoot apex or the lateral meristems, right? So this is the hormone which is actually present at the meristem regions. Clear? And now these are the powerful growth stimulants. So this hormone is a very powerful growth stimulant. So this stimulates growth even when it is present at a very low concentration. So with this we can actually analyze how how powerful it is, how powerfully it stimulates the growth in case of plants. Now the main natural auxin that we can see is IAA, and we call it as indole 3-acetic acid. So this is the main natural auxin that is found in case of plants. So this is some information, the introduction to our first phytohormone, that is auxin. Now the functions of the auxin. So the first function is it promotes the growth in stem, roots and fruits by cell elongation. So if we talk about a cell, right, so in this particular case the auxin will lead to cell elongation. So how will it lead to cell elongation? It will actually relax the cell wall of this particular cell. So there will be stretching, there will be loosening of this particular cell wall, right? Now when this cell wall, how much this cell wall will relax, will loosen, will get stretched, depends on the amount of the auxins that are present. So in case of shoots, there are more amount of auxins that we need to stretch the cell wall as compared to the roots. Clear? So what is the first function of the auxins? So they promote the growth in stems, fruits and roots by cell elongation. They elongate the cell, they stretch the cell, they loosen, they relax the cell wall. Okay, and how much that particular cell wall will relax depends on the amount of auxins that are present. Second one is it delays leaf senescence. So when these auxins are present in a very good amount, so in that particular plant or in that particular area of the plant, there is delay in the aging of the leaf, there is delay in the leaf death, or there is delay in the death of that particular part of the plant. Right. The next one is promote the growth of apical buds and inhibit the growth of lateral buds. So I'll draw a rough diagram. Okay, so if you can see, this is a plant. Okay, so these are the different branches and this is the tip of this particular plant. So you will see certain buds present over here. You will also see buds present at these points. Right, so over here you will also see the buds. So now the buds which are present over here, so they are called as apical buds. What do you call them? You call them as apical buds. And the buds present over here, they are called as lateral buds. Right, so in case of in the presence of auxins, they promote the growth of these apical buds and they inhibit the growth of lateral buds. So when there is an apical bud present, the growth in the lateral buds will be inhibited. If you want the lateral bud to grow, you will have to remove the apical bud, then only the lateral bud will start growing. Okay. So this kind of promotion of growth in apical buds and inhibition of growth of lateral buds. So this suppression of growth of lateral buds is called, so this phenomena is called as apical dominance, right? So it is called as apical dominance. So when the apical bud is present, the lateral bud's growth is suppressed. Okay. The next function of the auxin is it induces rooting in the cutting of some plants. So there are certain plants, if we need to, if we actually want this particular cutting to grow, right? So these auxins will only induce the rooting. So these auxins will only allow the roots to form. Okay. The fifth one is it induces the fruit formation without fertilization in fruits like apples and tomatoes. So this kind of development without fertilization is called as parthenocarpy, and such fruits are called as parthenocarpic fruits. So when there is no fertilization and we can see a fruit developing. Okay. So what happens actually when the fertilization occurs, then only the ovary turns into a fruit. But when there is no fertilization, how are we going to get the fruits? But auxins actually leads to the development of the fruit without the fertilization. Okay, so such that phenomena is called as parthenocarpy, and such fruits developed from parthenocarpy are called as parthenocarpic fruits. So talking about our next hormone, the second hormone, that is gibberellins. So gibberellin is the next hormone that we will study. So there are different forms of gibberellins that can be seen in plants. So they are GA1, GA2 and GA3 and many more, right? But the most studied form of gibberellin is GA3. So in case of higher plants, it is distributed in the meristematic regions where there is shoot apex, root apex, buds or seeds. So these are the different areas where we can find gibberellins. Now talking about the functions of gibberellins. So gibberellins, they promote the growth at internodes by cell elongation. So if this is a plant, right, so say these are the different leaves, right? So not very beautiful leaves, but yes, these are the leaves, right? So the area that is present between these two leaves, so that is called as internode. So which hormone actually promotes the growth of internodes? So they are gibberellins, right? So how do they promote the growth? They elongate. There is cell elongation. The next is it breaks seed dormancy and they initiate germination. When a seed gets dormant, so at that particular point of time, the seed does not grow. So there are hormones which actually break the seed dormancy when there are favorable conditions. So these seed dormancy will get broken and then only the seed will start germinating. So which hormone is responsible for breaking that seed dormancy? So that is gibberellins. The next one is they promote the fruit growth and they are capable of inducing parthenocarpy. So as we have studied in case of auxins also, so it also promotes the development of fruit without fertilization, and such fruits are called as parthenocarpic fruits. So the same is in case of gibberellins also. So they promote fruit growth and they also induce the parthenocarpy in these particular fruits. Now it also delays aging, as we have studied in case of auxins also. So when the auxins and the gibberellins are present, there is no aging, there is no dying, right? So they delay the aging, they increase the life of these particular plants, their parts. Now the last one is they are used in horticulture and food industries. So now these gibberellins, they enhance, so they do enhance the longitudinal growth of internodes. So they enhance the longitudinal growth. So basically they increase the length of the plants which are very dwarf. So if you want a tall plant, what will you do? You will actually spray gibberellins, right? So they also increase the length in case of grapes, in case of apples, and they also improve the shape of these grapes and apples. And also this gibberellic acid, they speed up the malting process. They speed up the malting process in brewing industry, right? Clear? So I hope this particular, the functions of these gibberellins, they are clear to everyone. So if you want a tall plant, what will you do? You'll spray gibberellins, right? So I hope the functions of gibberellins are clear to you. Now talking about a third phytohormone, that is cytokinin. So cytokinin was discovered by Skoog and Miller in 1950s, correct? So this cytokinin has specific effects on at specific points in case of cell division. So it is basically produced in root tips. The cytokinin is produced in root tips and it is transported to the other parts through the xylem cells. Now, you can see a large amount of these cytokinins in germinating seeds and developing fruits and embryo. So these are the places where you can actually find the large amount of this hormone called cytokinin. Now talking about the functions of cytokinins. So cytokinins, they stimulate the plant growth by cell division. So what we have studied in case of auxins and gibberellins. So we were talking about the growth by cell elongation. But in case of cytokinins, the plant growth is stimulated by cell division. Right? Now, it also promotes cell division even in non-meristematic cells. So, when we were talking about auxins and when we were talking about gibberellins, we were talking about the meristems, the site where there are actively dividing cells. So, only at those places the cell elongation was happening. But in case of cytokinins, they also promote the cell division even in non-meristematic cells or the non-meristematic tissues. Then, it also leads to the expansion of cotyledons. So where are these cotyledons? So these are the seeds, right? So in seeds, the cotyledons are expanded by the function of whom? By the function of these cytokinins. So they also break the seed dormancy and they promote germination. They actually break the dormancy in seeds, and when these seeds come out of the inactive stage, they start germinating. They also promote the chlorophyll synthesis in chloroplasts, and they delay the leaf senescence. So basically the leaf senescence, the aging, the death in case of leaves, that can actually be prevented by auxins, by gibberellins, and as well as by cytokinins. But which hormone helps in the synthesis of chlorophyll in chloroplast? So which hormone is that? So that is the cytokinin hormone. Then it inhibits apical dominance. So we were talking about apical dominance in case of the second hormone, that is gibberellin. So whenever apical bud is present, the lateral buds growth was suppressed, right? It was inhibited. But this can be reversed with the help of the cytokinin hormone, where they inhibit the apical dominance. Clear? The next phytohormone is ethylene. So ethylene is a gaseous hormone. Out of all the 5 hormones that we are going to study for plants, that are the plant hormones or the phytohormones, only ethylene is gaseous at room temperature. Now it is produced in fruits and they remain in the same fruit. So basically this gas is produced in certain fruits and it remains in those fruits only, right? Unlike that we have studied that hormones are produced at a different site, then they are carried to other parts of the plants or other parts of the body, right? But in the case of ethylene, it is produced in fruits and it remains in the same fruit. Then its site of synthesis is the site of its action. So what happened? Argain found this gas ethylene. So there was a gas causing the ripening of fruits that was found in oranges. So there were certain oranges that were producing a gas that led to the ripening of banana that was stored along with the oranges. So Argain, he named this gas as ethylene, and this is one of the plant hormone that is produced in the plants. But the only difference, the only thing that differentiates this particular hormone from the other hormones is that it is produced in the at a site and it remains in that site only. It does not travel to the other parts of the plant. Now it is produced in higher plants, it is produced in fungi, and all the living cells, they are capable of producing ethylene, but more ethylene is produced in the meristematic tissue. So basically all the living cells, they produce ethylene, but the concentration is more in case of meristematic tissues. So now the functions of ethylene. So ethylene causes 2 main processes in plants. The first one is reduction in stem elongation. So till now we have studied 3 hormones. This is the 4th one, and everywhere we were studying about the cell elongation or cell division, right? So auxin and gibberellins, they were linked to cell elongation, and cytokinin was linked to cell division. But now we have come to a hormone which reduces the stem elongation, and secondly which accelerates the senescence. So we studied about auxins and gibberellins, that they actually delay this senescence process, this aging process, right? But the acceleration of this aging process is done by whom? Which hormone? Which phytohormone? So that is ethylene. So there are certain another functions of this particular hormone, that is ethylene. The first one is ripening of fruits. So as we studied Argain, he found a gas that was being produced by oranges, and these oranges, this gas led to the ripening of bananas, because both the oranges and bananas, they were stored nearby, right? So it causes ripening of the fruits. Second is it initiates germination in peanut seeds. So you must have seen those peanut seeds. So these peanut seeds, the germination in them is initiated by the hormone, that is ethylene. Then sprouting of potato tubers. So you must have seen potatoes, you must have seen the tubers. So the sprouting of potato tubers is done by the hormone ethylene. Then promoting root growth and root hair formation. So how the promotion, how the root grows, how the root hairs are formed, because we know how important are these root hair, because they are the ones which which absorbs water and minerals from the soil. The last one is inducing flowering in mango. So in case of mango tree, the flowering is induced by this hormone, that is ethylene. Now it is the most widely used plant hormone in agriculture. So in case of agriculture, this is the most widely used. So we need to ripen our fruits, we need to ripen our fruits, right? So for that purpose we need ethylene, and this is the most widely used hormone in agriculture. So I hope ethylene is clear. So till now we have studied about the growth promoting or growth inducing hormones. So now we have come to our last hormone, that is ABA, that is Abscisic Acid. So this is the growth retarding hormone, right? So it retards the growth. It is found in angiosperms, gymnosperms, pteridophytes and some mosses. It is also found in the chloroplast of leaves, right? So it fruits and seeds, they contain a very high amount of ABA. So the Abscisic acid is the only growth retarding hormone that is seen, that is found in case of plants. Now the functions of ABA. So the functions of ABA are mostly opposite to what we have studied in the previous 4 hormones. So the first is plant growth inhibitor, which slows down the plant metabolism. So it basically slows down the plant metabolism, hence it reduces the growth of in the plants. Then it inhibits seed germination and development. So seed germination and development, so we have studied this in case of gibberellins and cytokinins. So they promote seed germination by breaking down the seed dormancy. So in this case, in ABA, it actually inhibits seed germination and development, mostly in case of stress conditions, when the conditions are very stressful, where plant cannot perform all the functions very well, when the conditions are unfavorable. So this particular hormone help the plant in facing those extreme conditions, in facing those drought, dry conditions. It accelerates the aging and falling of leaves, buds, flowers and fruits. So we have studied that most of the plant hormones, they actually they lead to the delay in the senescence and this aging process, but the only hormone that accelerates this process and leads to the falling of leaves, buds, seeds and fruits, so that is ABA. Correct. Then it stimulates the closure of stomata in the epidermis. So when there are dryness conditions, when the conditions are very dry, when there is drought condition, in that particular case, ABA comes into the picture, and ABA helps the plant to withstand those dry conditions, those drought conditions, by closing the stomata in the leaves. Then it increases the tolerance of the plant. So it is basically a stress hormone. So this particular hormone helps the plant to deal with the stressful conditions that can be seen by the plant around, like dryness conditions, like there are conditions when there is like the plant cannot perform more functions. So it basically stops the metabolism, it stops the seed germination, it closes the stomata. So the which hormone is the stress hormone? So ABA, Abscisic acid, is the stress hormone. Now talking about the tropic movements in plants. So if we talk about a seed, so if seed has to survive, if a seed has to grow, if the seed has to like protect itself and grow into a plant, so seed has to grow in a certain way, right? So that seed will grow its roots, that seed will grow its shoots, and hence it can perform its basic functions, it can prepare the food for itself, and it can easily survive, right? So for that, the shoots and roots, they need to grow in a particular direction, that the root should grow downward and shoot should grow upward. Correct? So when the roots will grow downward, so they will absorb water and minerals from the soil. When the shoot will grow upward, it can capture sunlight, it can capture carbon dioxide, it can transpire. So there are many functions, correct? So for that, there is an external stimulus which creates this response. So this is called as tropism. So the direction of response is related to the direction from which the stimulus comes, and this is called as tropism. Now this word tropism has come from a Greek word, that is tropos. Which word? So this is a Greek word, right? So tropos means to turn, correct? So from plant will just look for a stimulus, so the direction from which the stimulus comes, it will turn according to that, correct? So that is stimulus. Now the growth movements that are occurring in response to unidirectional external stimuli in plant parts, so they are called as the tropic movements, right? So the growth movements are called as tropic movements, and these growth movements are due to some external stimuli in plant parts. So let us start with our first tropic movement, that is phototropism. So photo, the word photo stands for light, and tropism means to turn or to move, right? So it basically stands for movement, right? So response of plants towards the light. So the movement towards the light or as per the light is called as phototropism. Now we have already seen in the chapter photosynthesis that the shoots, they always grow towards the light, right? And if there is a direction from which the light is coming, the shoot will always bend towards the light. So these are the different adaptations of plants, right? And in the other way, the roots basically they grow downward, they move away from the light, correct? So the shoots, they are said to be positively phototropic because they are attracted towards the light. So we can say that they are positively phototropic. They are positively attracted or moved towards the light, correct? And the roots are negatively phototropic, that they are not at all light loving and they move away from the light, correct? Now phototropism help to ensure that shoots receive as much light as possible, because when the shoots will receive light, they will perform photosynthesis, so they can actually photosynthesize more and they can have more food, correct? So phototropism help that ensures that the roots receive as much light as possible, allowing the maximum amount of photosynthesis to take place. So that maximum amount of photosynthesis take place, so that food can absorb more and more light, maximum amount of light, and it can prepare as much as food it can produce. Okay? All right. Now let us recall that activity that we did in photosynthesis. So there is a hormone called auxin, right? The phytohormone, the first phytohormone that we studied, that is auxin. This hormone is responsible for phototropism. So it helps in bending of a shoot towards the source of light by getting accumulated in the region of shoots which is not facing the light, right? So if we have a plant, so say this is a pot, right? And there is a plant. So this plant was actually growing upward. Now we have kept this plant inside a room, and there is a window from where the sunlight is coming. So eventually you will see that this plant will actually bend towards this window, bend towards the source of the light, right? So why is this possible? So the auxin, the hormone auxin, it is not light loving. So these hormones are basically they love darker areas, right? So if this is a stem, right, so these auxins will come towards this side, correct? And now since auxins promote cell elongation, so the part away from the light will actually elongate, will actually grow more as compared to this particular part, right? This particular side of the stem. So this is the darker side of the stem, if in simple words I write, and this is the lighter part of the stem. So if the auxins come towards the darker side, so in the darker side, the cell elongation will be more, and hence this particular stem will tend to bend towards the source of light. So this is how auxins promote cell elongation. So there is rapid cell elongation or growth on this side, causing the shoot to bend towards the source of light. So let us do a small activity to understand this phototropism. So let us now see the activity on phototropism. So we'll take a healthy potted plant, a very healthy one, right? So we'll keep the plant in the dark room by the side of an open window. So there is an open window. We have kept the plant over here. Now after a few days, the plant bends towards the open window. So the plant, you will see the plant has bent towards that open window or the source of light. So this plant is showing positive response to light. So this means when it is bending towards the light, it is showing that positive response towards the light. Correct? So this means that the shoots of the plants, they are positively phototropic because shoots are bending towards the light. So if you talk about the roots, they are still growing downward. They are not moving towards the light. There is no change in the growth of a root, in the direction of growth of roots, right? So this means that the stem, they are positively phototropic, right? So they are positively phototropic. Who are positively phototropic? So the stem is positively phototropic. Clear? So this is the experiment that we already discussed in our chapter photosynthesis. Now the next tropic movement is geotropism. So geo word means gravity, right? So now it is also called as gravitropism. So the growth towards the gravity. So growing towards the gravity of the earth. So just think about a part of a plant which grows towards the gravity. So very simple. So what are they? They are the roots. Fine. So they are growing towards the gravity. They are growing towards, they are growing deeper and deeper into the earth. Correct? So there are organs which grow towards the gravity. So we call them as positively geotropic. That is, for example, the root tips. Now the organs which grow away from gravity, they are negatively geotropic. That is shoot tip. Now there is a potted plant, and this potted plant, before it falls over, right? So this is a plant. So this little seedling is growing, and now what we'll do? We'll throw it, right? So now this pot will break, and it is basically tilted now. It is not standing upright. It is not tilted in this particular form. So now you will observe that the roots will not grow in this direction. The roots will change the direction of their growth, and they will start growing downward. Clear? And what about shoots? So shoot will start growing in the upward manner. Shoot will not grow in this way. Shoot will turn this way, right? So this means roots, they are growing down. They are growing towards the gravity. So they are positively geotropic, and whereas the shoots are negatively geotropic because they are growing away from the gravity. Clear? Now talking about the second activity of geotropism, where you must have seen the sprouts at home. So this is the first step that we have to perform. So take a few seeds of bean or gram, and then you sow them in a moist soil, right? So you take the sprout, you sow them in a soil, or you can directly sow a seed in the soil, right? Which is a moist soil. So basically the seed should get some moisture. So you'll see the seed will sprout in 3-4 days, and then finally the seed will give rise to a tiny seedling. So you'll see a tiny seedling like this, correct? So what is very important is we have to regularly water that particular seedling, and after 8 to 9 days we will observe that a shoot will come out of that seedling like this, and roots will grow downward. So this shows that the shoots are negatively geotropic and the roots are positively geotropic. Correct? So I hope this activity is clear. So these are the simple activities which can actually be performed at home, and you can actually understand these tropic movements by performing the simple experiments at home. So we already did one activity for geotropism. So this is the next activity which can be done in a laboratory, right? So there is an instrument which is called as clinostat. So it allows the potted plant to rotate at some speed, right? At low speed, you can say. So it looks something like this. So this is a stand over here. This is the thing which can actually rotate, a drum kind of a thing, and this is the rod with which this potted plant is connected. Now we have took two potted plants over here, and both of the plants are kept in the same setup. The difference is only that in, say, this is A and this is B, right? So in case of A, we did not rotate the plant. So the plant was not rotated, and we see the roots growing downward and the stem growing upward, right? But in case of B, what we did, we slowly rotated our pot. So this potted plant was slowly rotated at a very low speed. So due to which the gravitational force acted equally on all the sides of the plant. Or throughout the plant, the gravity was the same. So in this case, you will see the roots going straight, right? So the roots going straight, and the stem, the shoots, they are also going straight, right? So they are not bent upward or downward. So what we will be doing? We'll be taking two clinostat which are fixed with the potted plants horizontally. So we have kept these, we have fixed the potted plants in a horizontal direction. Now one is rotated and other is not rotated. Shoots of the stationary clinostat show negative geotropism and the roots show positive geotropism. So these are the shoots which show negative geotropism. Since they are negatively geotropic, so this means they will move away from the gravity, right? So they will move away from the earth. Clear? So they will move upward, whereas the roots show positive geotropism. So they will move downwards. They will tend to move downwards, right? They will turn downward. Correct? Now, other potted plant do not show any bending. Why? Because in this case, all the plants, all the parts of the plant, they are equally exposed to the gravity. Correct? So that is why, since we were rotating it at a very low speed, so each part was experiencing the gravity. So since there was equal gravity on all the parts of the plant, so there was no bending. The shoots went straight and the roots also went straight. So basically this plant was growing in a horizontal direction. Clear? So I hope the question is clear. Now talking about the next type of tropic movement, that is hydrotropism. So from the word hydro, what comes into your mind? So it is basically, we are talking about water, right? So the movement of the plant parts in response to water or moisture. So moisture is also water, right? So the movement of the plant parts in response to the moisture or water is called as hydrotropism. So if we talk about hydrotropism, so there is positive hydrotropism and there is negative hydrotropism. So in a case of positive hydrotropism, when plant parts grow towards the source of moisture, when they grow towards the moisture, right, when the moisture is there, right? Like if you see the roots, so roots always grow towards the moisture because they had to absorb a lot of water. Clear? So those are positively hydrotropic, and the plant parts which grow away from the source of moisture, so we call them as a negatively hydrotropic. Okay. Now the next is Thigmotropism. So Thigmo stands for touch. So these are the growth movements in response to touch. So as soon as the plant parts come in contact with any of the say stem or with any other plant, so that touch generates a stimulus, right? So you must have seen a sweet pea plant. So they have a very delicate, very weak stem. So as soon as this stem comes in contact with any support or any stick, so at that particular point it generates a stimulus. So stimulus generate. As soon as the stimulus is generated, it is sent to the lower parts of the tendrils, right? So this is a stem tendril. As soon as it comes in contact with any support, so this touch creates a stimulus which moves downward, right? And now this particular tendril starts coiling around that support. So basically this particular plant needs a support, so this touch creates a stimulus. This starts the movement of coiling around the stimulus. So there are leaf tendrils as well, where these, as soon as the leaf tendril come in contact with any support, it starts coiling around the support and gives this particular weak stem a support, right? So you must have also seen cascata. So like this was a very big tall tree, right? So this particular cascata, so this yellow colored structure is cascata. So as soon as the cascata comes in contact with the support, it starts growing like anything. It derives the nutrition from this plant, and it also takes the support of this plant, and it covers the entire plant like a wire mesh structure. So can you see the tree beneath this cascata? No, because it takes the support, it also takes its nutrition and starts growing like anything. Now the another example is vine. So all of them have tendrils that coil around the other parts of the plant, and in response to one-sided contact or touch. So all the movements which are due to touch or which are due to the contact are called as thigmotropic movements. Now there is one activity for hydrotropism. So what is our aim? Our aim is to investigate the effects of water on the growth of roots and shoots, correct? So for that we will do a very small activity. We will take a wire netting, or we can take a gauze, right? So this is a wire netting basically, and on this wire netting we have put some moist sawdust, right? Now what is this sawdust? So you must have seen people working with the wood, right? So the byproduct of that wood, or the fine the wood powder basically, so that is the sawdust, right? And what kind of sawdust we have taken? We have taken a moist sawdust, which means there is a little amount of water or the water particles in that particular dust. Clear? Now what we'll do, we'll take a clip, will hang it with a wire, right? Now we will put some germinating bean seeds on this particular sawdust. Clear? So I hope the how we are going to demonstrate it is clear to everyone. Now what we will see, that the seeds, they will start germinating. So radicle will grow downwards. So when there is a, say this is a germinating seed. So radicle, there are two parts, main two parts. One is radicle and one is plumule. So plumule always gives rise to shoots and radicle always gives rise to roots. So basically, since radicle will give rise to roots, so radicle will start growing downward towards the earth, right? So this is what we know, that roots are positively geotropic. So the radicle will start growing downward and they will go away from this, they will grow downward through the wire netting. Clear? And now the plumule will grow upward, because plumule will give rise to shoots and it is negatively geotropic, so it will move away from the gravity, and it is positively geotropic, so positively phototropic, so it will move towards the light. Clear? Now but soon what we will observe, that the shoots are growing upward only, but the radicle has turned and it has also started going upward. So this was the observation. Now let's see what did we conclude from this particular activity. So from here we concluded that the roots, they grow towards water and shoots do not. So if on one hand there is gravity, and on the other hand there is water. So roots will choose water over gravity. Correct? So for roots, water is more effective stimulus than gravity. So this is a very important line for you to remember, for you to understand. So they have left gravity and they have become negatively geotropic, but they are positively hydrotropic. Clear? So I hope this activity and the conclusion is clear to everyone. Now the last tropic movement is chemotropism. So chemo stands for chemicals. So the movement or the growth towards the chemicals or in response to the chemicals, not towards but in response to the chemicals, is called as chemotropism, right? So we have many examples for this. For example, the movement of pollen tube in angiosperms and gymnosperms towards sugars and peptones which are secreted by the neck canal cells of the female gametophyte. So these are the neck canal cells. So this pollen grain will start growing the pollen tube towards these sugars and peptones which are secreted by the neck canal cells of this female gametophyte. Clear? So this is the stigma, this is the style, and this is the ovary. The second example is movement of fungi growing towards the areas richer in food is also chemotropism. So when the fungi starts growing towards the food, so you must have seen a bread. So on that bread, the fungus starts growing. So it spreads throughout that bread where they get the food source. They do not move out of that particular bread, right? So wherever they will get a source of food, they will grow towards that only. The last one is the movement of tentacles in Drosera towards the source of nutrition. So when the Drosera tentacles move towards the source of food or the source of chemical or the source of nutrition. So all these examples are of chemotropism. Now let us talk about some questions from this particular chapter. So the first question is, the figure shown below shows stages of ripening of bananas. Answer the questions that follow. So you must have observed a banana. You bring a green banana from market, and if you keep it for a few days, it will turn like this, right? So name the plant hormone which is responsible for above. So what is happening over here? So the banana is getting ripened, right? So name the plant hormone which is responsible for this. So which plant hormone is responsible? So that is ethylene, right? So we have to give the two characteristic features of this particular hormone. So the very first thing is, this is a gaseous hormone at room temperature. At ordinary temperature, this hormone is gaseous at room temperature, and where it is the place, where the site where it is produced, it remains at that particular site. So just to recall what we have studied in this chapter, that hormones are produced at one place and then they are transported to another place, right? But in this particular case, in the case of hormone ethylene, the hormone is present, the hormone is produced at a particular site and it remains at that site only. It does not travel to another places, right? And the second one, so this was the second characteristic feature. So the site of the synthesis is the site of action for this particular hormone. Clear? So now the second question. So the question says that the diagram given alongside show a type of tropism. Study the same and answer the questions that follow. So you can easily recall what kind of tropism they are talking about. So we are talking about what? So name and define the type of tropism shown in the diagram. So what type of tropism is shown over here? So this is chemotropism, right? So what type of tropism is this? So this is chemotropism. Clear? So it is defined as the movement of the plant parts or the growth movement of plant in a response to chemicals, right? So let us see the B part. So label the guidelines 1, 2, 4, right? So one is what? So one is the pollen grain, right? So this is the pollen grain that is present on the stigma of the female gametophyte. So what is this? So this particular structure is pollen tube, right? Now what is this? So this is the ovule. What is it? So it is the ovule. And finally, what part is this? The swollen part below. So this part is the ovary. Clear? Now let's see the third part. C part says name 2 effective stimulants that help in the growth of second part. So what are those effective stimulants? So just recall chemotropism. So there we studied that there are certain sugars and peptones which are present in the neck canal cell of the female gametophyte. So basically these chemicals are the stimulants for the growth of the pollen tube. D part, name 2 groups where part 2 grows towards the female gametophyte with the help of the stimulant mentioned in C. So in this case, we have already studied this in chemotropism, that 2 groups where we can see this type of movement towards the female gametophyte are angiosperms and gymnosperms, right? So they are angiosperms and gymnosperms. Clear? So I hope this question is clear to everyone. Now the next question is study the diagram below and answer the questions that follows. So the first question is name the structure X and Y in the figures A and B. So this is a figure A and this is a figure B. So what are these structures? So just recall the touch movements, right? So this is what? So this is a stem tendril. And what is it? So this one is a leaf tendril, right? So this one is a leaf tendril. Now let's see the B part. Write the functions performed by the structure X and Y. So what are the functions which are performed by these structures? So these structures, as soon as they come in contact with any support, so they coil around that support, right? So basically they help the plant in climbing and growing upright. Clear? Now the C part, name the phenomena depicted and define it. So what phenomena is depicted in this particular figure? So you can easily make out. So this is touch stimulus, right? So we are talking about Thigmotropic movement, or you can say we are talking about Thigmotropism, right? So it is a phenomena where a plant grows, or the growth of a plant part in response to touch or in response to any contact. So that is Thigmotropism. Now D part. So D part says how do structures X and Y differ from each other? How do these structures differ from each other? So this is what? So this is a stem tendril and this is a leaf tendril. So it arises from stem, right? And this arise from leaf, L-E-A-F, sorry, right? So these are the difference between a stem tendril and a leaf tendril. Now E part says give examples of plants which show the said phenomena. So what all plants show Thigmotropism? So we have clearly read some examples. So sweet pea plant, then cascata plant, and also vine. So these are the 3 examples that we have studied. So I hope all the topics, all the questions that we have discussed in this particular chapter are clear to you. So we talked about the chemical coordination in plants, and what we studied about 5 hormones, and we studied about some tropic movements. So I hope the chapter is clear to each one of you. So we'll meet in our next chapter, and till that, as you know, LearnoHub free है पर best है.